Wow. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to the Seattle Public Library and its foundation. I got a little nervous. Thanks to every one of you who are here. I'm new to town. I came in here in about mid-September, and I think that one of the things that I came here for, the biggest reason why I came, or probably the same reason why you're here, is the amazing photo department at the Seattle Times. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. It's really something special, and I think that's what I want to offer to you in my newbie status, is that this is something to not be taken for granted. Photography at its core is magic. Somehow in digital or film or in tin, a handheld box freezes in time forever, our very reality. Our memories, our inspiration, our fear, pain, joy, our history, that evidence that we are alive, that we dream, we live, and that we take action. We bond with each other. Photojournalism, at its core, is a service. It is a gift from these magicians who choose it to put their talents to use in order to inform, inspire, educate, and delight us. The visual journalists at the Seattle Times do that on an elite level, and they do it every day. I want to tell you that not everywhere has it so good. This is a special group of extraordinary people who have committed their lives to telling stories with pictures. As an institution, the Seattle Times has persevered through the challenges that face our industry with dignity and grace. The Blethen family's commitment to stay on the mission of keeping the paper strong has borne fruit, and to do its work at the highest level for you, its loyal readers. That support has yielded results. The Seattle Times photo department has been elite for decades, but unlike many others around the country, it has stayed that way. That's special. Tonight is a celebration of that gift, and again, I thank you all for taking part in it. I also want to call out a special group of people who don't always see the spotlight for their tireless and endless work that they do, and they are exceptional. The Seattle Times photo editing staff. Brandon Garcia, Nicole Passia, Mindy Ray, Travis Ness, Managing Photo Editor Colin Diltz, and Deputy Director of Photography Bettina Hansen. You amaze me every day, and I thank you for what you do. So tonight, I hope you all enjoy the heck out of this celebration. We will hear from from three of our talented journalists about how they do their incredible work, followed by a Q&A where we look forward to hearing from you directly. And to cap it all off, we have 2 framed prints that we're going to give away with the raffle tickets that you got on the way in. And please, if you don't already, consider subscribing to the Seattle Times and tell all your friends to do the same. And the conversations that you have about the world around us and how it's important to stay informed, make that a tangible part of your dialogue with people about how to stay connected with this type of information, because it doesn't come easy and it doesn't come free. We can't do this without you. And with that, I'd love to give you the Seattle Times Pictures of the Year. There's a lot more than that they did last year. It's amazing. I'm truly blessed to be here, and thank you all for sharing this night. It's really cool. Our first up presenter is someone who has stepped up at the last minute to fill in for Ivy Sabala, who we had hoped to present to you tonight, and she fell ill, unfortunately. She's doing okay, but we're going to have her slotted in for next year, so count on that. Ken Lambert has been with the Seattle Times since 2002, and every day he goes out and makes our jobs more interesting, more surprising, more fun, more reliable. He's the guy that goes out and makes the day happen every single day. He does it without complaint. He doesn't ever cause a problem. He often solves them. And he's here tonight to share with you a little bit of behind the curtain of how it is that he does his incredible work so consistently. Ken Lambert.
Wow. I love Seattle Public Library, and I love coming here and speaking to you. This is the second time I've done it in person. I'll start with this. This is just up for one reason, and that is when I was in high school, which was over 40 years ago, I just want you to know that I always keep my word. Thanks for joining this celebration of newspaper photography. When I was interviewed for a staff photographer position here over 22 years ago, the director of photography said something that was a first for me in a job interview. In other interviews, I had been asked how old I was and why was I looking for a job after staying at a newspaper for a decade. But Cole Porter took me out to lunch at 13 Coins and simply said, "I want to talk to you about your journalism." Wow. That had never happened. He didn't want to talk about pictures. He definitely didn't want to talk about salary. And I immediately thought, I think I'm going to get this job. Because for me, the photography has always been in service to the story. Understandably, most people outside our profession think we mostly take pictures, and we do take a lot of pictures. But how and why do some pictures make it into publication? I'd like to share a little about my own experience over 40 years and address that question. There are two sayings that I like. The first is, I'd rather be lucky than good. And the second is, good photos aren't chosen. Good photos are chosen, not taken. In other words, with nonfiction photography, we must be prepared to expect the unexpected, and we must know what exactly to do with all these photos we take. As a newspaper staff, we're deciding for you what you'll see at an event. What goes into that process? Obviously, it's a lot about choosing. It's really, for me, all about editing. These are some Seattle Times photos I've taken, but more importantly, chosen. I've chosen to file them to the editors, and that first edit is called a report. That's what I call it. The report is a first draft, a set of photos of anywhere from 3 to 10, maybe even more. They're strong aesthetically, strong in moment, and strong journalistically. When I say journalistically, I don't mean they have to have heavy news value, but they need to be faithful to the story we're reporting and fair to those in the photos. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., where I had a 17-year career, which included assignments from newspapers, magazines, and the Associated Press Wire Service. I've been interested in documentary photography specifically since high school. What I'd like to do is show you my process as a news photographer from assignment to publication. I can sometimes take hundreds of photos on an assignment, sometimes thousands. But if there isn't one clear image that is elevated above all others, I'm kind of in trouble. It's a picture that clearly leaves the others behind. This is a photo that editors refer to as the lead. And the key is to recognize it before your editor asks for it. The other goal that I try to do on assignments is, you can't always do it, but you're trying to strive for making an image, taking a picture that can only go with that assignment. This is a good example. You cover many, many baseball games, but when the Mariners finally do make the postseason, what is a picture that says that? This gentleman took his vanity plate off his car, or I should say vehicle. Every photographer has their own process for finding their lead image on an assignment. But for me, there's only one way in. Let the subject matter tell their own story. I know it sounds kind of zen, but it works. I see myself there mostly as an on-site first editor and logistics expert. My edits start through the camera. I try not to force the photography. I don't look for pictures. I look for story. Because if I understand the story, the pictures will shoot themselves. Often, I just don't take any pictures. I ask a lot of questions. This is a situation where if I'm covering a mother who is homeless, the first instinct is to show that she's in a tiny house village. But my first question is, if she has kids, and we're doing this story for Mother's Day, can we photograph her picking her kids up from school? I filed this report on Pacific Northwest Ballet soloist Madison Rain Abeyo, who has danced in more nutcrackers than anyone else. The event is a rehearsal, and I'm not posing Madison for any of the photos, but my edit is a collection of portraits. I don't know which photo the editor is going to pick as the lead, but if they ask for my opinion, I have strong opinions. But I also acknowledge that an editor's doing their job, and their job is not to make me happy. But let's go back a bit. Here's an image from over 40 years ago. It's taken on Tri-X, black and white film. One thing to keep in mind is that news photography changes over time. The technology itself changes the images, and even the ethics change. But one thing doesn't. It's documentary photography in nature and rooted in either the portrait or the snapshot. That's my strong opinion, is everything that I do is rooted in the portrait and the snapshot. This image of a DC high school performing group, they're performing the music of Stevie Wonder for a summer production of street theater. I think this is both a portrait and a snapshot. I took it as a teenager myself, and I consider it a breakthrough moment in my development because it was what I call a salvaged image. What I mean by that is I created a new noteworthy image with impact by cropping out a fraction of the whole negative. The negative itself it wasn't useful as a photo. It didn't read. So I took a part of it. The way I actually shot the frame was not really aesthetically pleasing. I didn't take this for a newspaper. I took it because my girlfriend at the time is in it. But if I had been working for a newspaper, I think it would be considered for a lead, although the shape would be challenging for a page designer. The second image is from a protest at a U.S. Army depot in upstate New York. Remember the no nukes protests of the 1980s? I consider this my first news image of note. It shows good use of available light from my favorite source at 5 a.m., a television camera, but offers little news value. And here was the aha moment for me. The photo editor at the Daily Orange News student newspaper at Syracuse University took the image and paired it with an arrest image. And these two photos would, going forward for me, establish the power of editing for the rest of my career. It helped that each photo represented each side of the issue, protester, counter-protester. The top image is cool to look at, and it grabs the attention. The other has elevated news value since it shows an arrest. The challenge, can we combine the two ideas into one image? The lead image should be both graphic and newsworthy. As I became a professional in 1985, I was assigned to cover a rodeo during an internship in Kansas. I thought I had done a good job as the intern, but again, I was about to learn something about the battle between photojournalism's demand for aesthetics versus content. Even though it ran on the front page, I received criticism from some of the staff photographers who, and I quote, said, "This is nothing but a groovy image." That gripe wasn't about it being a good documentary photo. It was about the lack of journalism. A groovy image. I had never heard the term, but I never forgot it. Later generations would rebrand that and call a picture like this eye candy because of color photography taking over. So since 1985, I've been trying to combine aesthetics, moment, and news value, i.e. content, into my edits. While working at the Associated Press in DC, they called the edits that I would file to New York reports. That's when I started using the term myself. I don't just file pictures. I file a report, which is edited to track the story and contain a lead image. And why do I get to have this power over the editors? Simply because I'm there. Here's an example from last week, a story about ferry ridership that's gone up. My editor gave me heads up that it's aimed at as the lead story in the local section for print. Part of my instructions are to concentrate on the fast ferries because they're an important part of the story. So a lot of people ask, like, how do you even know where to go or what to do? We're all emailed assignments, and some of them are very good, like this one, which has a lot of information and links. Other ones aren't so good. They barely say anything, and you have to do what I call decoding. You have to start Googling and trying to find out more. So sometimes I'm emailed the draft of a story, and here's my report that I sent to the photo desk via Slack. I tried not to go overboard. I tried to make all the pictures different. The first two pictures represent the fast ferries, actually the first three pictures. So my edit includes a range of photos for all three platforms: broadsheet, online, and online is like a screaming deal if you didn't know, because there's a lot more photos online than in the print edition. So print edition's nice, but also you got a subscription that will take you to the website and you get a lot of photos. Just an aside here, I didn't know it at the time when I took it, but that's one of our investigative journalists, Mike, in red there. So this was my favorite picture, and it didn't really make print, and it didn't really get a lot of play online, but it made social media, so I was a happy camper. Oh, I should just say, going back, the most time-consuming part for me is writing the captions, And it might seem like we just take a lot of pictures, but the captions do take a lot of time. They have to be accurate. Each of these ferries, I had to double check, the name of the ferry and where it originated. The Kitsap Transit, you see at the bottom, their website was completely wrong because what they were actually doing is saying the initial route that the ferry was on, and some of those ferry routes had changed. So let's turn to some POI images and their reports. So you get to actually see the whole edit, not just the one picture. So this is Irina Rose of West Seattle popping out of Elliott Bay after her swim on Christmas Day last year. As a major atmospheric river is in the forecast. And that was really the assignment, was to do some weather photos for the atmospheric river. And here is my Christmas Day report. Just 4 photos. There weren't a lot of people out. And the 2 umbrellas to the right, to the extreme right, that is Irina's husband. And so I started talking to him, and she was swimming, and I wasn't even going to photograph Irina. But we started talking, and at some point he said, you could photograph my wife swimming. I said, okay. But, a picture of somebody swimming, that's not so interesting. So, but then she started doing these big pops out of the water, and she was thanking the Lord, and she was saying Merry Christmas over and over again, and I trying to turn to her husband, and her husband said, this is all part of her routine. So I was like, oh, okay. She does this every time. I go, how often does she do this? She swims every week. So I was like, okay. So this ended up, I was very lucky. I just, falls under the heading, I'd rather be lucky than good. And it got good play online and in print. So last April, I covered a media tour before the opening of the Link Light Rail 2 line, and I was given access to photograph train operator Gina Sparrow, who usually is working behind a locked door. This is the report that I sent my editors. So all these pictures are in the system, and it's actually a very weak set of pictures. There isn't really a lead here except for Gina. So if I didn't get the Gina photo, it would have been ugly. It would not good. But I had kind of planned that Gina was going to be the lead because I knew the route, and I knew that if I could see through the front of the train, I was going to get this tremendous skyline view, but I just had to wait about, an hour and a half to get it. In October, I was assigned to cover the afternoon section of a march celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Indigenous Peoples Day in Seattle. I saw Thasuku Perkins, 7 weeks old, being prepared for more marching by his parents, Red Rock Perkins left, and Elena Eagle Shield. Both were from North Dakota. So I'll admit, let's see the report. I struggled on this assignment. I was really looking for different pictures. And again, I covered a lot of marches. I was really trying to get to the nut of what makes the Indigenous Day March different. And I think I found it in that first picture, and my editor agreed. And I think James was editing on this day, and he picked it for the front page, which was wonderful. And finally, I'm always looking for new ways to incorporate the use of drones in our coverage. We have about 8 or 9 pilots now on the staff. When I started flying for the paper, there was maybe only 1 or 2 pilots. So on Sundays, there's not a lot of news to cover sometimes, and I just decided to do a series on fallen leaves. We had already, as a staff, covered the turning of the autumn colors. So this was kind of like the next thing. I thought, well, I can do this because, we've already done the colors, and now they're all falling on the ground. So that one of the truck was my personal favorite. And And here's how it ran. So I was a little disappointed, I thought, the editors are really good, they kind of do their thing. But then it made it online, so I was like, yay, So, so we're nearing the end, and I just want to show you a few more reports and mention why photo editors are so critical in the process of getting to publication. I had covered both Lunar New Year and specifically the Tet celebrations before, and I was changing up a few things last weekend. This is from last weekend, but basically sticking to a previous path of coverage at Seattle Center. I tried to do one thing different, and that's that second photo. Instead of photographing the fan dancers, the fan dance actually in performance inside Fisher Pavilion, I made the decision to do the practice outside because I thought the light was nice. And then the martial arts at the bottom, I did that inside. And I had done that before, and I had also photographed children wearing their beautiful aoyais. So I had done the lion dance, and I just sent it off to the photo desk, and this is what Kara, my brilliant editor, picked. She went with that, and I didn't say anything, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think she recognized it was a really different picture, and we still kind of got the lion at the bottom, and then on the jump, more lion, and wonderful child photo. So I think this is the last report. This is just a series of portraits, and that top picture, that top left picture is the one that you think, okay, that took a lot of time to kind of set up, and he had a ladder there. He's working in a studio, so I kind of use what's around, and it is lit. I use just one flash on the camera, and I just turn it and bounce it to the wall. I don't carry like a lot of lighting equipment anymore. And this is what the editors went with. I think Colin might have edited this, I think. Colin, did you edit this? Oh, okay, good. Thank you. We both were in agreement. So this is one last report. I want to come full circle and show you the importance of that philosophy of just needing like one good picture, one lead picture, and how you don't know what it's going to be until it happens sometimes. So what's happening here is, this is October 3rd, 2021, Kyle Seager's last Major League Baseball game of his life. He would end up retiring in December. So it's against the Angels. The M's aren't in the playoffs, so there's no news there. So this kind of, like Kyle leaving is kind of the big thing. They stopped the game in the 9th inning to celebrate him. His entire career's been with the Mariners. And you see kind of towards the bottom, you see J.P. Crawford in tears. You see right above, Kyle's hugging in the dugout. But then there was a situation where the head groundskeeper ripped out third base, Kyle's base, and gives it to him. And he immediately starts just holding it up like a trophy. And he's starting to cry, and he's turning away from me, and I'm just dying. I'm just like, okay. And then you see the guy on the left, he's going to start moving over. And then I finally is starting to get a shot, but his eyes are closed, and the guy in the blue is about to completely take me out. But this is the moment. You don't give up. You pray to the photo gods. That's what my excellent retired editor, Fred Nelson, would say, right, Fred? You would say, pray to the photo gods. Pray, 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 and all you need is one. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce to you a real news hound. He's just a terrific photographer, and his career is really young, and he is just going all out and just doing extraordinary work. Nick Wagner.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ken. A little behind the scenes into my everyday at the Times is I'm online at Slack on Slack at the same time as Ken is, so we work the same schedule. So I see his photo report come in on Slack, and I'm wowed every time. It's truly an inspiration to see your work come through. And we covered the same Indigenous Peoples Day, the same march. I had the first half, he had the second half. And I had the same, and I met the same family with the baby. It's like, okay, I have a cool photo. This will, well, I'll bring it up. It was a cool photo, yeah. This will be good, colorful. I see his report come in. I was like, damn it. His photo's going on the front. But anyways, it's really great to see so many supporters of local journalism here tonight. Our work is nothing without y'all. Again, my name is Nick Wagner, and I'm by just a couple of weeks the newest photojournalist here at the Times. I joined the paper last May, and before coming to the beautiful Pacific Northwest, I worked for the Kansas City Star and the Chiefs, or as I'd come to know it, y'all probably have come to know it, the Taylor Swift beat. Before that, I worked for a hyper-local nonprofit news outlet in San Antonio, and I spent my first 3 years as a professional photojournalist at the Austin American-Statesman, alongside our new director of photography, James Gregg. In total, when counting internships, I've been a member of 7 different newsrooms, so I can say without a doubt how lucky Seattle and Washington State as a whole is to have the Seattle Times. It embodies everything that a community newspaper should be: trustworthy, insightful, fair, accurate, family-owned, and my favorite, rich with striking visuals. I got my start in photography just because I like the magic of it. Yeah. How's this? Okay. I'm a visuals guy, not a words guy, my bad. So, growing up, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but the importance of these same qualities that I just mentioned, of great community journalism, were instilled in me at a young age, thanks to my mom and dad, who are here tonight. They escaped the dead of a Minnesota winter, and they join us here, so thank you for being here. Every morning before school, I'd saunter into the kitchen for breakfast, and my ears would be met with the latest news from Minnesota Public Radio. After dishing up my breakfast, I'd plop down at the dining room table where that day's editions of both the Minneapolis Star-Tribune and the Fargo Forum awaited me. Although I was never much of a reader, I always pored over the photos, specifically the sports photos, trying to guess which photographer shot which photo without looking at the byline. I was amazed by the access photographers had to some of the athletes I idolized the most, like Kevin Garnett, Randy Moss, Torrey Hunter. That's when my love of photography really started to take shape. I'd eventually save up all my money from my summer job at the golf course to purchase my own camera kit, and I started covering my classmates' sporting events, selling the images to their parents. Fast forward about a decade or so, and I've never been filled with as much pride when I get to proclaim myself as a photojournalist on assignment with the Seattle Times. And now I'm excited to share with you some of my favorite images from my first 8 months here. In case y'all have forgotten, y'all are really, really fortunate to live where you live. I am just astounded every day by how beautiful it is to be here. I shot this photo while feature hunting out at Golden Gardens, and it reminds me of my first week in town. I had just made this big move halfway across the country with my dog, Abe, some 30 hours. And although it's not the exact same place, I had this really grounding moment, just staring out across Lake Washington from Matthews Beach at the Cascades and feeling an incredible sense of calm, like I had finally found my home. It's a feeling that I will never forget. Speaking of calm, I shot this image of Common Power volunteers, Mary Wilson and Ed Chad, participating in a breathing exercise after they spent their morning canvassing for Nevada Democrats in Las Vegas. I'm fortunate to be sent to some really cool assignments, sometimes out of state, where I just get to totally immerse myself in one single story, hanging out with the story characters for more than just a 20-minute assignment, so you really get to know one another. It may not always make for the most eye-popping photos, especially with political stories, but the work is important. I typically work a 9 to 6 shift, but every now and then I'll start a little early or go a little late considering the assignment offered by any of the great photo editors at the paper. In this instance, a Love for All boat hosted by Visit Seattle was worth pushing back my shift. 56 couples gathered on board to renew their vows to celebrate the kickoff to Pride Month. As we were coming back into dock, I stumbled upon this quiet moment. Below deck was a little bit more loud. Seattle-based drag queen Ben de la Creme performed a burlesque act for the couples. I hadn't even finished my second week at the paper when then photo director Angela Gottschalk called me up at the end of my shift and asked if I'd go to some place called Friday Harbor. Quickly put her on speakerphone and started Googling, and before she could ask if I could find someone to dog sit, I was cutting her off to say, yes, send me, I'll go. So this and the next couple of photos were made for a story about San Juan County's switch to a 32-hour work week. It ended up affording folks more opportunities to pursue their passions and hobbies outside of their 9 to 5, like these actors with the San Juan Community Theater. Reporter Dan Beekman arranged some interviews before we made the trip out, and our first visit was to meet a man working at the county's Public Works Department. But this woman, Sharon Lowell, stole his thunder when she shared how she benefits from the 32-hour work week, at least for me, thinking visually. The 3-day weekends give her more time to tend to her bees and produce Bill's honey, named after her dad, which she sells in a local grocery store. As a photojournalist, it's pretty easy to say I learn something new every day. And on this day, about my 10th day in Washington, I learned pickleball was y'all's national sport. And that's how Ethan Schmidt, at left in this photo, enjoys his extra free time off of work. I woke up early, my second to last day, I believe, on the island to chase the sunrise. Just, again, shocked by the beauty and wanting to capture it for myself, even if the photos didn't make the paper. So I set my GPS to the San Juan National Historical Park. Upon arriving, I saw this random group of about 6 photographers just chilling in a grassy field just beyond a wooded area. Quickly put 2 and 2 together as I heard from a woman on the ferry from Anacortes that there were fox kits on this side of the island. So I slapped on my 400mm lens, which is about this big, with a 1.4x extender for an effective 600mm lens, and joined the party. I bet you all could guess which night this was. It's this assignment that inevitably comes every 4 years for journalists, photojournalists. All 9 of us staff photographers were spread out across the city and state for election night coverage. I was stationed at Stoop Brewing in Capitol Hill, where the night quickly turned from hopeful optimism to worryful watching. Michael and Stephanie here encapsulated that vibe. And down in South Park, members of the Boeing Machinists Union gathered for a spirited rally, but this moment caught my eye. It's a quiet moment shared between husband and wife, and at that point, the strike was entering its 1 month of picketing, and it started to feel like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I felt this moment illustrated the union's enduring fight for a better contract with the aerospace giant, way better than any fist raised, shouting image could portray. I made this image down at Powell Barnett Park, where more than 100 asylum seekers made camp. The encampment prompted Central District community members to call a press conference, calling on city officials to provide funding to house the asylum seekers. As the conference wrapped up, I decided to shift away and explore the encampment myself, and came across these kids playing soccer. And I've covered immigration throughout my career, and it's I guess you're on the outside looking in, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the numbers, especially in the current political climate, but behind the numbers are children, mothers, fathers, human beings, all in the pursuit of the promise of a better life here in America. I admit I'm not the strongest portrait shooter there is, and for that I have a love-hate relationship, but sometimes they just all come together. As is the case in this portrait of Michael Crowley, who as part of a pilot program that rewarded him with gift cards in exchange for reducing his alcohol use. I didn't expect much when we first met because he seemed a little shy, camera shy, but just a little bit gentle instruction, and his expression matched the story. Sports. To be honest, it was a big adjustment to go from shooting nonstop football in Kansas City, back-to-back Super Bowls. Rihanna performed, Usher performed. That was cool. I come here, I shoot 2 games because Jenny Buchanan and Dean Rutz, they kick ass every game. You guys see their photos, and it's awesome to see. So I was super happy when I was a lone photographer in one corner of the end zone. Interception occurred. It was against the Bills. It ended up not mattering, and I was a lone guy. I was getting just pelted with rain. I was like, oh, this stinks. And then this happens, and they run right to me. I'm like, heck yes, I'm the only one there. Heck yes, and they just ham it up for me. It was perfect. And then every now and then, if I wait around just long enough at a scene with a photo in mind, a willing yet unsuspecting participant will enter my frame and make the image for me. This was definitely one of those times. The piece is called John with Art. You can imagine what the art is, by artist Robert Arneson, and this is at the Seattle Art Museum. It provided just enough intrigue for Sydney Martinez to peek into the toilet bowl. The slight lean, her toes picked up off the ground, her polka dot dress. This just makes a fun, lighthearted photo I love to get whenever I can. Even protesters clad in black bloc can make for a lighthearted photo. I came upon these two swinging near the quad at UW as they hung out near the pro-Palestinian encampment as conservative leader Charlie Kirk spoke on campus. The fun, of course, later turned into tense confrontation as protesters blocked attendees of Kirk's event from entering the quad where the encampment was stationed. But I'll take these lighthearted moments anytime I can get them, as one day at work can bring smiles and the next can bring heartache. This was the case outside of Garfield High after 17-year-old student Amar Murphy Payne was shot and killed while trying to break up a fight. I've covered a lot of gun violence, from murder-suicides, officer-involved shootings, church shootings, and school shootings. In 2013, as a senior in high school, my math teacher turned on the news as national TV networks streamed scenes from Newtown, Connecticut, outside of Sandy Hook Elementary. The images of the children crying as they were escorted away from the school were seared into my brain. And although it will never be easy to cover any act of gun violence, it is important that us as visual journalists are there to document the effect of it. At the risk of sounding incredibly self-righteous, if not for local journalists, then who will show the world what is happening in our own backyards? Murphy Payne was killed June 6th, and still no arrests have been made. And children aren't even safe on summer break. 13-year-old Jada Woods Johnson was shot and killed while shopping with friends at a mall north of Seattle. Her shooter, 16-year-old Samuel Giza, turned himself in that night. He remains in custody with bail set at $2 million. So work can bring about a roller coaster of emotions. So long as you're able to get through the dark days, there's usually light around the corner. Like getting to go out with Samish DNR Natural Resources techs as they track the health of kelp forest in Rosario Strait. It's assignments like these where you realize just how awesome this career is. Can't think of any other job that would put me in places to experience and learn about things such as how important the kelp forests are in the kelp carbon cycle. Using unique tools like a drone launch from the deck of a boat or an underwater housing to get up close and personal with kokanee salmon as they return to spawn in record numbers. On the lower Elwha River, about 10 years after the completion of a $350 million dam removal project, members of the lower Elwha Clallam tribe fish for coho salmon. I joined environment reporter Linda Mapes to the fishing opener as we reported on the tribe's efforts to restore the river to its natural state. Here, Vanessa Castle proudly holds his fish she caught and, as tradition demands, gifted to a tribal elder. Stehekin. I remember this assignment like it was yesterday. I was spending my late night at the gym when now Deputy Director of Photography, Bettina Hansen, texted me about the Pioneer Fire and its march towards Stehekin. I feel like I thrive in breaking news situations where nothing but uncertainty is a guarantee. Uncertainty meaning the Washington Department of Natural Resources media folks who are there to assist media in telling stories, suggesting for me to just set up shop in Chelan, some 50 miles away, downriver, shoot some photos of the smoke plumes. That wasn't going to cut it for us. So I chartered my own course, packed my bags, booked a ticket on the Stehekin Clipper, and went out for some tried and true boots on the ground journalism. And I lucked out thanks to many willing residents who, among the chaos of protecting their property against the flames, enabled my reporting. Craig Stevens, who I met when I first arrived in Stehekin, graciously opened his home to me after learning I was planning to pitch a tent. We broke bread, talked about his family ties to Stehekin, and then in the morning piled in his pickup to attend the daily fire meeting, seen here, where I shocked everyone in attendance when I introduced myself. The fire captain, for whatever reason, was just like, let's go around the room and everyone can introduce themselves. All residents, everybody. Comes to me, I'm usually like, no, I'm here on assignment, blah, 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 you don't need to know who I am. And I was like, whatever, Nick Wagner, Seattle Times. Every head spun around like that, breaking necks. And it made sense. I realized how tight-knit the community was, and they were curious who this outsider was and what my intents were, and it was to be there to tell the story. After the meeting, Craig introduced me to Mandy and Joe Kitchell. Mandy gave me a comprehensive tour of the Stehekin Valley, including a stop at the Stehekin Pastry Company, which fueled my reporting with a cinnamon roll the size of my face. Joe built the Stehekin Clipper that I rode into town on, and he also built this dinghy, which he took me out on to get a different perspective as firefighting aircraft attacked the flames. And they attacked from sunup to sundown. It's honestly hard to make a bad photo in such a beautiful place. For those who've been there, you already know. And when the day turned to night, the steep mountains surrounding Stehekin were glowing deep orange. Hours before making this photo, I fed my reporting photos and videos back to the office, again lucking out with internet access as Starlink enabled my transmissions. After 3 days of reporting, I was beat. Definitely not nearly as much as the firefighters doing the real work for 12-hour shifts, but it is draining wearing all the hats as a one-man band on a remote assignment. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy my time. I even made a new friend. This is Craig's son, Ryder. He was a hoot to hang out with. He loved shooting photos of the flames at night and would compare them to mine. After supper, he egged me on to a push-up and sit-up competition. And that's what it all comes down to in this line of work, at least for me, is access. 90% of the challenge is gaining somebody's trust, especially on breaking news assignments. If I show up in somebody's world, it is often during one of the most stressful parts of their lives. So being able to connect on a human level and ensure that their story is safe in my hands is paramount. With that, I turned to our own backyard in the aftermath of the bomb cyclone. I shared a drone image before, and our lead drone photographer, Ken, does this really well. We do journalism from the air as much as we do it from the ground. We don't just fly to fly. We fly when there is value-added reporting. I may not have even found the scene without my drone, as I was a street over shooting some other damage to homes. And when I was done flying in the sky, I refocused my storytelling on the ground, showing some of the people most affected by the storm, and showing the helpers. And of course, showing how life goes on. Even among the madness, life goes on. To close, I returned to one of my very first assignments for the Times, back out at Friday Harbor. Nothing truly brings me to a state of euphoria quite like Mother Nature. As I made this image, I let out a primal scream that probably would have scared Bigfoot themselves. Itself, I don't know how you refer to Bigfoot. Seattle crowd here. So I was just screaming. I was screaming my head off, and it was a delight to hear everyone else echo my screams. I feel like I just had to break the ice, and then everybody else went wild, hooting and hollering when the sky just really started to open up and dance. And then to return home from Friday Harbor and see the Sunday paper, not just waiting for me in my driveway, but waiting outside the homes of many of my neighbors, that is a surreal feeling. And maybe, just maybe, there's a young kid sitting at their dining room table, dreaming to one day have the greatest job in the world. Thank you for your attention, but mostly, thank you for your support of community journalism. It's an honor to tell your stories. It's now my pleasure to turn y'all over to Ramon Dompor. Ramon is a video journalist at the Seattle Times, and he's here to share some of the video work done by the team this year.
Okay, hello, hi everybody. It's been a few years since I was standing in front of all of you. I don't have nearly as much of a presentation as Ken and Nick have, so I'll keep this brief, but I am Ramon Dompor. I've been a video journalist at the Seattle Times for a bit over 7 years now, and in that time I've been very lucky to work alongside our lead video journalist, Lauren Frone, and a very inspiring cast of reporters and photographers at the Seattle Times while reporting stories about protecting the communities, ecosystems, and wild places that make this corner of the world unique. Our two-person video team works on everything from breaking news to in-depth, multi-part projects. These video stories offer viewers a first-person perspective on pressing issues to understand experiences outside their own and to linger in overlooked corners of our community. Now, it may surprise some of you to learn that very little of my job actually includes filming around the city or from one of the famously scenic venues around the Pacific Northwest. Filming constitutes maybe 10% of my job. I spend the other 90% of my time at my desk editing, responding to breaking news, and slowly building out story ideas and connections with the people generous enough to trust us in sharing their stories. The times that I am able to bring a camera out into the field, I'm grateful to experience this place with my own eyes and spend hours learning about each person I interview. In 2024, we walked through legacy and old-growth forests, waded through the Hoh, Skagit, and Skokomish rivers. We saw art that defied gravity, preyed on our fear of the undead, and found beauty in darkness. We looked back on our region's complex history, remembering those lost in the Oso landslide 10 years ago, and learning how the Bolt decision has affected more than just the right for tribal members to fish in their own home waters. We met people who work tirelessly to preserve the communities they've built over generations and build new communities through love and acceptance. So to close out the year, we compiled some of our favorite reporting in a reel with contributions from all of the visual staff at the Seattle Times. And this is our 2024 year in video.
The demand for wood products here in the state of Washington is on the rise.
And legacy forests are carbon workhorses.
There are some things more important than just obeying a law. We've got to do something to save the planet and save these forests.
It's going nuts.
From a cultural standpoint, it really was significant from our history to fish for steelhead. Our ancestors, had never envisioned that the runs, would diminish to the extent that they have.
This fish has been taking this journey into this alien world out in the Pacific Ocean, and then suddenly we connect. We all have the same goal. How do we come to agreements to actually make it happen?
I love to see the accomplishment, the aftermath of a kid saying, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. I don't know how to jump rope. And then the aftermath, like, this is the best day ever.
Fear is so primal, it's so basic, and being able to express fear without putting yourself in danger is exhilarating.
Even if a performer is up there just like having a catharsis, it's almost like therapeutic for them, it feels like it does that work for the audience as well.
The last thing any mother needs to know is like when you ask for help, the people that's supposed to help him is ultimately the one that sends you to his death.
He's not here with us, but he can feel when the other world. He can feel what we did for him, we do for him.
There's like a mudslide and everything's gone, the houses are gone.
Are there any injuries?
All the homes in Steelhead Drive are gone.
Why did it have to happen? Why did it have to happen when it happened? We want people to understand what this community was and who lived here and to tell this story.
Grief and the ocean go together. You know, they talk about flow state where you're fully in the present. You're not thinking about anything, but you're like in your body, surrounded by the water.
For 100 years, the Indians were not allowed to fish. Complete deprivation of the opportunity to survive, to take care of ourselves.
Most people actually don't really pay attention to addiction until it comes into their world.
They belittle youth when they say, I have this problem.
The only reason I got sober was because my mom reached out a hand to me.
Started noticing the transition from there being needles on the street to fentanyl foils being on the street. Just like seeing people's humanity and understanding that a lot of the people are struggling.
Community is like everything to me. Like I could just sit and hang out with the homies at the skate park for hours and just chat. Not even necessarily about the skating. Just being in the safe space to just like be ourselves.
Ken says Ken said he had 3 corrections in his entire career at the Seattle Times. I need to make one right now. We have a brilliant night photo editor, and she's working right now so we can all be here. She has more experience at the Seattle Times than I have a whole career of. She leads our Seattle Seahawks coverage in all of our sports. She makes autonomous decisions all the time. She's a leader, and she's a champion. She's a brilliant photo editor. Kara Brannon, thank you. I'm so sorry that I didn't list her earlier, and I needed to fix that. You guys want to come up and do a little Q&A? Come on over, guys. All right, now, check. All right. So now's the time of our programming where we'd love to hear from you. We'll have a couple of volunteers in the audience going through to hand a microphone. If you want to just raise your hand, and have some patience. We'll get to you, but if you have questions for these folks right now, is a great time to ask. Who wants to start us off? Can you hear me okay? Great.
Right here. Right over here.
Great.
You're all men.
Oops.
What happens when you need to cover women's sports?
What happens when you need to cover women's sports when you're all men?
I'd
Jenny,
like to...
Jenny, get down here.
I'd like to just...
Jenny Buchanan.
Jenny,
everybody.
Jenny, get down here.
Is this on? I'd like to apologize to everybody about the representation on stage tonight. I feel like I am very privileged to work with an amazing group of women journalists in our newsroom, and I promise they're represented much more strongly on the photo desk than you see here tonight. But yeah.
Maybe we should have all the photographers come down here.
I'm game for that.
We'll show you some representation. Ellen.
We got Ellen Banner
Karen,
in the house. We got Karen Ducey in
Jenny.
the house. We got Jenny Buchanan in the house.
Come on down. Come on down.
It's a great question, and thank you for recognizing that we were all male up here tonight. We were hoping that Ivy could be with us, but we obviously are not giving a proper representation of the Seattle Times tonight. Yes,
So I had a question about how the title of an article will inform your picture and whether or not you've ever had the experience that your photos did not match or work with the title that they chose for the article.
Did you ever have an experience where your photo didn't really match very much with the title or headline of the article?
I'm curious, you don't usually know the title of the article when you're sent out on an assignment. So sometimes the title would inform what you're going to shoot, I would think.
Yeah, how do you make pictures if you don't know what the title of the article is going to be? What do you know how to make pictures of, or what the picture should be?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question, and I've often asked my editor or a reporter, give me the lead, what's the headline, And the fact is, sometimes we get into a story, we don't know where it's going, we don't know what the story is, but we just work on a hunch. And I think that's just the nature of the business sometimes. And hopefully by the time the senior editors get involved, the news editor especially, she's going to make sure that the headline and the pictures and the story all go together.
Hi, my name is, oh wow, that's cool. My name is Josiah Johnson, and several of you have commented on seeing these really tender moments or devastating moments, and being there and having the honor to take those photos. And I'm wondering if there's anything that's too private or that you would see as unethical to capture, that you would take a photo of.
Is there something too tender or intimate we would get to a point in which we would stop photographing because it's too much?
I think that kind of always crosses my mind, especially in hard breaking news situations, shootings, as I alluded to. But a lot of the time, at least I come to this, is would putting my camera down be a disservice? I understand you have to have empathy to the situation, and it can be really difficult at the time because it's oftentimes a really powerful image unfolding right in front of you. And for us, I guess I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, it's just really hard when there's such a visceral photo to be made and it tells a story like that. But that's also not to say if somebody sees that or I go up and I ask for their name for a photo caption that I'd prefer it not to run, then I'll respect that. And there's other images to be made, and that's not the end of my career right there. I think it's just a case-by-case basis and going by feeling and being a human first and a photojournalist second.
It's a really good question. I always think that there's a situation where the public might not realize that just because we take a photo doesn't mean we'll publish it. But sometimes the mere act of taking the photo can cause harm. It can cause hurt feelings. It can be triggering. I know even during the protests around the George Floyd time, and a lot of the protests here, this was a new generation, a younger generation that I had not encountered before in a protest situation. I had come in my career really very influenced by the civil rights photographers. And this was a whole new ball game. And I had to listen to people who were in their early 20s telling me that this was inappropriate. We're talking advocates for homeless sweeps did not want us to cover that. Also, literally, any of the protests shutting down the highways. This could all be a situation where if you didn't have a dialogue, there were also people, because of social media, that were very concerned with doxing, where they would be recognized. And all these came into play, but the one dialogue I remember having was, and this was possibly manipulative on my part, but it was something that I think the people I was covering needed to consider, that they're 21, 22 now. And I just asked them, someday you might have children, even grandchildren. You're making history right now. You're making history right here in Seattle. Don't you want them to be able to see what you did? And I just left it at that, and some said, just don't show my face, or yes, they would listen. So it's a process, it's a dialogue, but it's important to not just say, I'm the press, and that's kind of the way I was when I arrived here 22 years ago. I came from DC, whereas I had never had people put their hands over my camera lens. That happened here, and I was changed by the city, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that for me, I mentioned very briefly, I only spoke for like 30 seconds, but the 90% of the job that isn't filming for me, a lot of it is relationship building with the people, who are sharing their stories with me, and making sure that they, that I don't do them a disservice, that I'm not going to, misrepresent the way that they're going to tell their story. So when those tender moments do come, we've already had that conversation. I asked them, like, I know that this is, particularly sensitive time for you. Is it okay if I'm, in that space, sharing that time with you? Is this an important part of the story that you think, needs to be captured and shared? So that conversation's been had. It's not just up to me. And I think that is a new part of journalism that hasn't always been there. But it's a part of giving a certain autonomy to people so that they can control the way that they're represented in media, that they haven't had that ability to do so in the past.
There is a bit of I'll call it a burden that a photojournalist carries, that they are there not to be comfortable all the time. They go through a great deal of discomfort in order to be the person who's able to be in the places that we either cannot go or will not go. And so they bear witness for us in those ways, and have some difficult decisions to make about when to use imagery or not. And a lot of times that we talk about access, and sometimes access can mean uncomfortable things, and then sometimes an audience or a viewer may actually feel that discomfort arrives even in a different context or threshold than a subject or a photographer. And so these are waters that we trust these photojournalists to navigate for us in a lot of ways. And so when we talk about credibility and why it is that it matters to have an organization that's credible, you're trusting that they did a good job and that they followed these ethics that you're hoping that they do.
I have a question. My original question was going to be the one that gentleman asked, but you guys answered that really nicely. And so I have kind of a less deep question, which is how many pictures will you take on any given shoot?
How many pictures do you take on a given shoot?
Well, personally, it really kind of varies. Like on that portrait report, it was maybe 100 pictures, but say a Mariners game might be hundreds of pictures, because it's every inning and you're having to file every inning. If you wait to file everything at the end, you're gone, you're lost, you'll blow deadline. You just have to keep it rolling. And you might have shot hundreds of pictures by the 5th inning, and then the game completely changes in the 6th inning, and you've just thrown, none of that stuff's going to get used, maybe in a photo gallery. So it really varies on the assignment. And then some photographers might, Stehegan, he must have shot thousands because it was many days.
I think I used to be a much heavier shooter, motor driving, everything. But I've become much more selective. It just makes it easier for me when I go in to edit. Instead of having to look at thousands of images, I can look at hundreds and get through them quicker, especially not shooting as much sports. I have much less external hard drives to burn through, so when the cameras nowadays can shoot 30 frames per second, you can fill them up like that. So I've become much more selective with my shooting and when I'm clicking the shutter.
This one's kind of funny for me because I mostly do video, but occasionally I'll be on assignment where we can't send a photographer, and I'll be asked to do stills and video at the same time. And I'll take maybe 15 photos, and I'll send 3 to our editor. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is all I have.
Okay, interesting question, nuance here. I've heard a couple of you use the term to make photos, right? That I was picking up. James, I think you said that. Ken, I think you said that as well. Is that intentional, or are you talking about composition? Is that a different way of looking at photography as opposed to something that one of us might say, to take photos?
What's the difference between using the word to take a picture or to take a photo and to make a picture or to make a photo?
Well, it originally went back to public relations for us, because if we took a photo, it sounded like we took something. And then we started saying, oh, we're not going to say take a photo anymore. Let's say make a photo, because then, that won't imply that. But, now it's just really loose. I mean, I think a lot of people consider their photography of family members. They say, I took a photo of my family member. But I think some photographers think that they're, creating something. So it's more of, I think they're kind of interchangeable.
I think words matter. And so I think that at some point along the line for me, when I was exposed to the learning process of getting involved in all of this stuff, I was influenced by a lot of different trains of thought. And there was a thought that said, elevate the value of how you think about what you do. Then you will behave in that way. And the way that you behave in the nuance will have reverberations and impacts on everything else. So the mindset that one adopts by considering that I'm having an intentional process of making something rather than going and extracting or cheaply grabbing is a mindset that I attempted to adopt in the way of my thinking so that I could try to be elevating the quality of what I was trying to do.
All right, we have time for one more question, which is right here.
Shout out. Shout out to Ken for mentioning triads.
I am Generation Triax.
We had a good one down here. The question is there anybody up here going to be the one photographing when Ichiro Suzuki is inducted into the Hall of Fame?
No. No, they're just not here.
We will be there.
Yeah.
The Seattle Times will be there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of two photographers, I'm guessing.
Up there.
Sorry. My question is just along the lines of when you're capturing a story or like something that has both positive and negative sides to it, how does like the photos, like say like the wildfires, for example, where the shell-shocking image is the fires, but the more powerful story or the more impactful story could be the community coming together to fight it or showcasing how much resources. How does like the photo decision-making process of getting that center shot come into play?
Repeat the question. Sorry, I wasn't quite captured.
The question was about balancing, in this instance, the Pioneer Fire in Stehegan. And there's these shocking images, but there's also the community aspect as far as rallying around one another to help save their beloved community. correct? More, okay. Yeah, I probably didn't show the widest take from that shoot as far as what we published. But a lot of it, the story was, and the story that the residents told me that wasn't getting out was that they were there and they were helping protect their properties, their businesses, their livelihoods, and whether that's cooking thousands of meals for the firefighters, clearing brush that's would ignite just like that and just cause even more damage. So that was the part of us being boots on the ground, so we could see it for ourselves instead of having to rely on public relations teams, whether or not what they were telling us was true. So I think in our report and what we published kind of showed both sides as far as, it was a dramatic scene, right? The mountainsides were all burning, steep cliffs, hard to reach, hard to knock down those fires. But at the same time, the community members who stayed back were fighting and putting up a valiant fight. And I think we portrayed that well. And it wasn't just, the story was unique and one of my favorites because it wasn't just like hard line journalism that I did. I also wrote like a point of view piece where it was more or less a love letter to Stehekin and how much it reminded me of my small town where I come from, where it takes a village and everybody rallies around another. And was a really like heartwarming, beautiful thing to see in such a stressful situation. So I think the editors and everyone at the paper and the feed that I get sent back did a appropriate job of telling that story.
I think that's it. Y'all, thank you so much for the thoughtful questions.